I'm going to start with a little prayer of gratitude, and then I'll do, for all the new people, I'll do just a little short description of what is energy healing, and then all that will be followed by a recap of yesterday's meeting, because these two meetings kind of go as a matched pair. And then we will dive into today's topic, which is a deeper exploration of the causal level of creation, which is a very sort of rich and yummy field, a field of endless fascination to me. So, all right, here we go. Thank you to being, divine being, the source of creation, the source of everything. Thank you for being everything. And thank you for being this webinar, this live webinar. Thank you for being all the structures and forms of consciousness which self-interact to create the creation and to heal our bodies and to support our enlightenment, our awakening. Thank you. Thank you to the ancestors. Everyone's ancestors so precious, and without them there is no physical body. So with great gratitude to that aspect of manifestation, thank you to all the ancestors and the physicality of our existence. Thank you to everyone here, everyone joining me today, for blessing today's session with the ability to work concisely and efficiently. May we dive deeply into the details of the causal field and promote any healings that are required or necessary or useful for opening of understanding and capability in the field of energy healing. Thank you to the eternal tradition of wisdom. All right. So, what is energy healing? A person falls ill, and then they need something to get better. So, a person can have medicines or procedures to get better. But the medicines and procedures are basically catalysts to activate the body's innate healing capacity, because the body falls ill, either something within its own nature goes awry or something from the outside like an accident occurs. But the ability for the body to heal really comes from within. The intelligence that restructures tissues, that rebuilds tissues, or that balances chemical structures in the physiology, that intelligence really comes from inside the body. So if we take a medicine or something, the medicine is there as a information, like a little capsule of information for the body. It's like chemical information for the body to explain to the body what it needs to do to heal itself. So what we're doing in energy healing is we're kind of bypassing the medicines and the procedures and that sort of thing. And we're going just directly to using consciousness as the instrument to activate the body's natural healing capacity. That's what we're doing in energy healing. We're using consciousness as the medicine. And the beauty of that is you have consciousness. And so that's something that is free and available to everyone. And in energy healing, the way we use consciousness is we direct attention into the area that requires transformation. And attention is consciousness. Pure attention, pure perception, pure consciousness, it's all consciousness. So consciousness is folding in on its own nature. And as it does that, it upgrades, it educates itself. Just like the medicine is like a little package of useful information, so the consciousness can stand in the position of representing. Consciousness can represent knowingness, knowledge, and it can fold into the area of the body that's fallen weak or fallen down or not functioning in a balanced manner, and it can bring back the piece that's missing. It can complete the incompletions. So energy healing is about learning to direct attention intelligently. And these sessions, these live webinars, are training sessions for you to understand the mechanics of how consciousness folds in on its own nature to promote evolutionary healthful transformation of the physiology. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing here. So these webinars are about providing you with the tools that you need to heal yourself through energy work. All right. Oh my goodness, 3 questions have already come in. Wow, that's exciting. Thank you, everybody. I love you. I appreciate the questions. Oh, they're all from my team. Oh, thank you for sending in. Okay, yeah, he's sending me in questions from the emails. Oh, beautiful, beautiful questions. Okay, awesome. All right, so we'll do that. So that's the recap. That's what energy healing is. Now I want to just do like a quick recap from yesterday's healing session. And there were some beautiful healings that came out of that. And for those, you'll have to look at the recordings, which you will receive after this session is over. But the work from yesterday was basically a very quick, essentially, it was a review with elaboration from the previous webinar, where we talked about the human perspective on the causal body. So first we need to put the causal body in perspective. Also, there was a much more elaborate what is energy healing from yesterday. So for those of you who want a little more detail, a few more navigational tools there. All right, so one of the tools we talked about yesterday was looking at the ocean of consciousness from the perspective of more dense, more concrete, to more subtle, more abstract. And ultimately, concrete would be the physical level of the body, which is consciousness made manifest. And then finer, finer, finer. And as we go to finer levels of the physiology, that which we know to be ourself expands, becomes more abstract, spreads out, until we come down to the finest manifest level of what we are, which I'm using the word causal to describe that. That's the causal level. That's what I'm using. And then beneath that is being. Beneath that is unmanifest, infinite, quality-less being, source of creation. So source of creation is the resource. All the energy and all the intelligence and all the creativity and all the power to create this whole universe comes from there. And then the causal level of creation is where that resource starts to become implemented. And so that's why a webinar like this is really useful, because we go looking into that well begun is half done, that first level of how do we implement this incredibly rich resource of energy and intelligence and creativity and power that's available from the source of creation. So we need to look at that, because if we can understand that level of the manifesting process, then that level is fundamental to all the more dense expressions of self. So if we get the first step right, then all the other steps should follow in nice order. All right. So here we are in our physical form in our life, and we're taking a dive inward, and we're looking at the finest level of feeling, of being, of manifest being. And the review from yesterday is we can see it in 3 different ways. We can see it as realms or spaces. We can see it as vibrations or frequencies, or we can see it as humming spaces. So you can see it as just spaces, just hums, or hums and spaces together. It's important because having the freedom to look at or approach the causal level from these 3 different perspectives provides us with some flexibility for dealing with different types of problems. And I gave lots of examples yesterday. All right, so that's the review from yesterday. Okay, so today we want to look at, I've got some beautiful questions that have just come in, and as I mentioned yesterday, it's important to have a little bit of today's discussion about suffering, because when illness is there, that is one of the features of our world. That is something. It's why we have energy healing. We wouldn't need energy healing if there was no suffering. So we need to kind of get some understanding of that and get that in perspective. And then we need to look into a little more detail about those humming realms in the causal field and the relationship with karma, because suffering and karma tend to also go together. All right. So now I'd like to just take a minute, and look into the field of our collective, our beautiful collective this morning, and just kind of check in and see how everybody's doing. And again, just as it was a few minutes ago before we started this webinar, I'm feeling the very nice, unfettered connection to the source of creation. And I feel as if there's a huge amount of resource that's like backing us up this morning. There's a lot of energy. It's like a lively, rich access. So that's a blessing, but it's also a responsibility, because when we have access to that much source energy, then that means that we're required to use it in an honorable way, to use it in a way which is good for everyone, which is uplifting in the highest and best possible way. So the first flow that's coming through is a flow of gratitude for access. And we're looking at that very delicate spot between the source of creation, where the resource is, and the causal level of the physiology, and gratitude for the fact that it's wide open. Secondly, appreciating the fact that that resource is like a kind of a light that's flowing into and illuminating the causal level of our physiology. And I say the causal level of our physiology like it's one thing, because at the dense level, we're all separate. I'm over here and you're over there. But at that causal level, the abstract physiology spreads out and we overlap quite a lot. We're quite overlapped. There's another point that came out yesterday, which I think is important and is being illuminated for me now. And that is that we also made a little inquiry into the way other beings, not human beings, and stars in particular, view the causal realm. Because that's another angle. They have completely different physiologies than us. Stars have completely different physiologies. And they see the causal realm as a great ocean of light, at least to the best of my ability to describe what I perceive they are seeing, the stars are seeing. I spent quite a bit of time inquiring this last week based on a side project that I have. So the causal realm, as it lights up with the radiance of pure being, it looks to me more the way it looks from the perspective of a star, just a ginormous ocean, infinite ocean of light, field of light. So the star doesn't see it with all of its little separations. And that light flowing and our ability to appreciate that the causal level of creation is also that, it creates bliss in the causal field. So that's another quality that's sort of growing or awakening in the causal field. And as we talked about yesterday, as different qualities sort of awaken in the causal field, then they form foundations or building blocks for the manifestation at the denser level, the physiology. So the open relationship between barely manifest and unmanifest allows this flow of light to come into the causal realm. And that flow of light is revealing the delicate internal structure of the causal body, and at the same time is creating happiness because our collective is recognizing it. The act of recognition naturally elicits an effect of bliss. So this is a principle in energy healing. This is a principle that if there's suffering in some part of the physiology, if we just bring our attention to that part of the physiology, the very act of bringing the attention elicits a response of upliftment of feeling. It brings happiness with it. The other thing is that the happiness that's coming through is radiating from the causal level like that, and it's radiating up into the denser tissues and denser levels of the physiology. But what I'm seeing as it comes up is it's coming up in a very integrated manner. So it doesn't overwhelm. It's very important that we talked about this yesterday, that if a person is sort of gripped into the darker levels of creation or gripped into the brighter, lighter levels of creation, either form of gripping isn't balanced. So when that power or energy of being starts to rise up into the denser levels of the physiology, it has to come up in a balanced manner in order to do maximum good for the physiology without setting everything off its kilter. Maintaining alignment with cosmic evolution. So I'm just feeling that as it's rising up into the denser levels of the physiology. Now I see why it's doing that. So as it's rising up into the denser levels of the physiology, it gets to areas like the etheric body, physical body, and even mental and emotional bodies. And at those levels, that's where we interface with the relative level of creation. And at the relative level of creation, that's where we come in contact with suffering. So their memories and impressions of suffering. And I'm seeing primarily in the heart area, this is where the suffering gets a little bit locked into the system. So right there, we're going to just awareness in the heart area. And what the suffering that I'm seeing is from centuries and centuries and centuries of experience, memory, human memory. So as that happiness comes in, it creates an interference pattern with the memories and impressions and the feelings that got locked into the heart of loss and grief, all in the transformation that occurs in creation. Almost always when there's a transformation, it can give rise to a feeling of loss. So just clearing that, attachments in the heart that may have caused that feeling of change to be uncomfortable. And some flexibility moving in there. And the flexibility is, of course, the quality of the causal field. It's like a resonation of the causal field that rises up and goes to the heart area and supports the ability to make transitions very smoothly. Just you see the shift, you see the direction, the trajectory, and you just move with it. This is supporting all of our abilities, actually bringing a kind of quality of flexibility into our collective so that as a collective, we can move in a coordinated and integrated, balanced manner very efficiently, where it's like oiling up the machinery of our collective, that we can start to move in a sort of powerful, unified pattern in order to do the larger healings that we as a collective need to do in order to support beautiful progress, well-being, all good for everyone. It's interesting. As that's happening, I'm also seeing a kind of a stability coming into the group in the form of beautiful, orderly interface of threads of consciousness, which are connecting our group in order to promote the most efficient possible outcome of each step that we take collectively. Beautiful, you're beautiful. You're so beautiful. Thank you. All right. So when I was taking a deeper look into the causal realm, one of the things I noticed was that from the human perspective, it's like looking at a house with rooms. And we come in with a sort of package. Oh, first I should say, I looked into what the Vedas had to say about karma and package, right? We come into the world with our package of karma. And so there's There's Sanchita karma, which is like the great mountain of karma that's created by every act that you've ever performed in the past. And there's Prarabdha karma, which is the present life karma. And then in a book in the other room, there's the other karma, whose name is written in that book, which I don't remember. And that's the future karma, future karma coming in. And all of our brilliant Vedic scientists out there, you may have the name for that third kind of karma. As I admit, not being an expert in Vedic science, but also a great appreciator of Vedic science. Anyway, so we can think of those three karmas as past, present, and future. And that's good and that's useful. But at the causal level of the physiology, we're seeing more detail. So I have to make up my own words at this point. So what's happening there is I'm seeing the spaces which resonate. And so I started going in and looking at them in detail. And what I found was that every space has a kind of a sacred center, and every edge is comprised of karma. And I think there was a webinar a long time ago, maybe a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, where I talked about the shards of the broken mirror, which is actually a phrase that I borrowed from somebody else, but it's apt when talking about the way awareness traverses the field of creation. It breaks apart. And so it was karma. I found karma on the edges of those packages of awareness, packages of consciousness, karma. So I realized that karma it has this sort of binding or constricting, it creates tension, and it defines the edges of the spaces. Now, the nature or the shape and size of the spaces determines the type of resonation which they produce. So some spaces are like very isolated. It's just like you can sort of portion off exactly where they reside in the causal realm, like a little bubble in the causal realm has been created. But some structures are more systemic. They run through the causal realm, and we touched on that just briefly yesterday in a very interesting part of yesterday's webinar, where I talked about the relationship between the way we see the causal realm and the way people who are not in the body anymore, who've died, are looking at that, and did a healing for compassion. That was an interesting moment. So anyway, just reflecting back on that briefly, that sometimes the resonations, they all have a center. Every space has a center. And what happens is from that center, the resonation is produced. And sometimes if the walls or edges of the space aren't like really dense, they're kind of like more pliable, more gentle, more soft, then the radiance of that comes from that center of that causal space can go out and meet with the field of creation. And the resonation goes into all the areas. Actually, even if the space is a very dense space, its resonation will still be echoed or reflected in all areas of the field. But there are times when the heart of the space, this is all, by the way, this is all new information coming in right now. Like I'm learning as you're learning. So just throwing that out there. Anyway, the heart of each causal space has a significance. And the closer the nature of that heart is to the field of pure being, the better connected it is. And it's sometimes I see them as like cords, just like the cord of light runs through our bodies. Cord of light runs through all these causal realms or causal spaces. The more connected it is, the more systemic the effects of the vibration from that particular space are. I think it's useful at this point to bring in a little thread of something that came up in the last couple of weeks, which was, I became aware when I was in the middle of a healing with a family member that there was, I found one of the hearts. I found a heart in one of the spaces which had been formed by my karma when it came into this lifetime. And it's so close, the heart of that one is so close to the absolute that it had been going virtually unrecognized by me, mostly taken for granted, I would say. But when it came up clear as a bell, I looked at that, I was like, oh yeah, that feeling. I remember it so well from before I was born. And I remember really experiencing it a lot as a toddler, very small. And the last time really experiencing it really clearly and distinctly, I was about 2.5 or 3, right about in there. And I looked at that thing and I looked at what was going on in my healing with my son. And I said to myself, that is the foundation for this experience I'm having right now. There's the foundation for it. It's like we were on the surface having our surface experience, and then I was also seeing the seed of the surface experience, and I recognized, oh, that's something that came into this life with me. So we can look at certain types of karmas, like sustaining walls in a house. There's certain karmas that aren't going to move, that you don't want to move, that are self-chosen for this lifetime, very important for each of the events of the life to follow in an evolutionary manner. But there are other walls that are non-weight-bearing walls, non-sustaining walls. And those walls have the ability to move. And when a wall crops up in the causal realm that gives rise to illness or suffering in some way, it's all rarely going to be a sustaining wall. It's almost always going to be a wall that you can move. So we need to talk about moving walls. We need to talk about construction. We can think of the causal realm as a realm where the laws of nature, of construction of consciousness or structure begin, because you've got the unmanifest quality-less level of creation that has no structure. And then at the causal level, we start structure. So all the laws of nature that are responsible for structuring everything, both manifest things as physical as flowers and people, or as abstract as thoughts and ideas and beliefs, etc. The foundations for structuring come from there, from the causal level. Okay. Moving walls, moving walls. So there are short-term and long-term effects, short-term and long-term. And what's generally the general pattern, and this could be unique to Kali Yuga, which I actually believe it is that if we choose, the short-term effect is based on the immediate decisions in the moment, right? So there are two different types of choices that come up. There's a really easy choice and a really hard and a harder choice. When there's a problem, right? The problem is in front of you. You have choices, okay? One choice is, I could just run away. That's an easy choice. Or the other choice is, I could go into this thing which is fearsome and yucky and messy and get dirty and see what's going on in there. And so that's the harder choice. Or I can put up walls. That's another kind of running away, right? There's an old archetypal story that the thicker the walls the person builds around them, the smaller the being is inside. And I don't know how universal that is, but anyway, that's more in the field of psychology. But the runaway is easy, and the go in and face it is hard. But what's really interesting about that is when we look at the long-term effect, it is opposite. If we do the easy process in the moment, the runaway, or I'm just not going to look at that, or I'm going to be in denial, then the long-term effect is not as nice. It means that whatever that problem is doesn't get dealt with, obviously. But if we do the more difficult choice in the moment of dealing with it, then the long-term effect is that thing got dealt with. A new wall got built, and now the structure is more aligned with divine intention, with cosmic evolution. So, and it forms a foundation. Then that action forms a foundation for better experience in the future. So one of the complications that we're dealing with when it comes to dealing with challenges is that because we're living in Kali Yuga, the laws of nature tend to sort of favor. There's a favoring of suffering. I hate to say it. Even the words kind of bug me a little bit to say it, but one doesn't have to look any further than the news to know that at this time in creation, it's not that hard to find the suffering. It's there. I mean, look at South Sudan, look at Syria, look at Venezuela. There are all kinds of, look at what the people in Hawaii are going through right now. So there are a lot of things that are bubbling up. Guatemala. Yeah. So one doesn't have to look far to see that the changes are there which are causing evolution. The migrant situation, yes, somebody's just mentioning here on the chat, the migrant situation, which I referred to Syria because that's kind of the seed of that. Yeah, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. So what that means is that instead of the way it would be in Sat Yuga, where you just barely have an intention of anything and it manifests, because the laws of nature are supporting all the positive and the good to just come up to the surface quickly, one goes into that and one has to kind of work with those laws of nature that are allowing the negativity to be. They're allowing it to be. That means they're allowing the karma to show on the surface. And so we're really, when we're dealing with restructuring our home, we're using our home as a metaphor here, when we're dealing with restructuring and building walls in new places so we have a more open floor plan or whatever it is that suits, we're really talking about working directly with karma. So, tools for working with karma for everybody, healing for everybody, structures in the causal field itself that are specifically designed to work with karma. We can look at them from three different angles, right? We can look at them as a realm, as a vibration, or as being. So we can say there's a realm, there's a space in the causal field, which is all the laws of nature, which are responsible for the creation and dissolution of karmas and the modifications of karmas. That there's a space where those laws of nature are gathered and lively. And this is part of your causal body. You have continuous access. It belongs to you. This is you. This is part of you. It's kind of like being in medical school and going through and learning all the parts. And this bone is called the ulna or whatever, we learn the different names of the different parts. And being able to define verbally something that we're looking at really helps to lock it in place as something that one has access to. When we're looking at it first as a sort of abstract thing, it's like, there's a realm where the laws of nature are for dealing with karma. That's a little abstract. Okay, so let's look at it from the angle of vibration. The vibration, the frequency of energy, of consciousness in that space is exceedingly powerful. It's exceedingly powerful and noble because the capacity or ability to transform karma is fundamental to literally everything that manifests. So it's huge. It's a huge responsibility. It's a huge capability. It's a huge thing. But you can do it. You wouldn't be on this webinar if it wasn't your birthright and it wasn't for you to do this. We have to do. It's not just that. This is why we did that healing for the base of the head to the neck yesterday. I don't know if you recall that, but that was This is the chief, and this is the Indians, right? So we had to open that up a little bit. Individuality and universality, we had to open it up and get that smooth out that connection in the physiology. And everybody who's new and wasn't in on yesterday's session, you get all the healings from yesterday too, even if you weren't there, it doesn't matter. Because we're at a time in history and our world, just wait. I have more information to bring you in future webinars, but it's a very big deal. But the world and humanity are at a time now where we're on the brink of facing challenges which are going to require a much larger capacity to promote evolutionary change, a much greater ability to work with the laws of nature and to heal ourselves and our world and others. We're on the brink of it. We're on the brink of it. So we need this, even though it's very powerful, and we think, well, maybe in my life I don't need that much responsibility. It's okay. You're going to be happy to have it because you're going to need it. So welcome to the healing circle. Anyway. All right. So it's a space of being where all the laws of nature reside. There is an energy signature or frequency there. And that energy frequency sits at what I would call the forward end of the axis. Yesterday I talked about the 4 axes for navigating the ocean of consciousness. There's an axis that ranges from less aware to more aware. Okay, so the energy frequency in this particular space of the causal realm is like way at the forward end of the aware. There's a lot of awareness that goes along with that particular space. With awareness goes into that space of self. Access to great wisdom, access to great knowledge, access to understanding of how the mechanics of consciousness reveal this reality and reveal divinity, express divinity as the reality. If we look at it in terms of beings, we can think of the karmic board. Sometimes I've referred to the karmic board. And that would be a collection or a group of forms of creation, which also sit on the forward end of that axis from less aware to more aware. So not so much the workmen, the little devas who make the skin glow and that sort of thing, but more at the larger end of creation, the great universal saints, their names, people before me have identified those forms like Mother Mary, El Moria, Master Lady Nada. I think Maitreya is on the board. There's many. I don't know how many. You can look it up. You can Google it. For me, I found in energy healing, it's not necessary to go in and to have every single name at the tip of my tongue like that. The important thing is to recognize that it's part of myself. It's like, if you want to pick something up, better talk to the right hand, because that's how we pick stuff up, right? So it's like that. It's like if you want to move karma, you go to that part of the being. So when we want to pick something up, we don't think, oh, let's see, I have to move this muscle like this, and then I have to open my... No, you just reach out and grab whatever. You grab the thing and you pick it up. So that's what we're doing. We need to be efficient. We can get caught in it. Sometimes it's easy to get caught, in the names and the personalities and the visual images and all that of the forms. And that's okay. It's okay to explore on that level because it's uplifting, and it could be your Dharma to do that. If you're an artist, you might want to, make paintings of the karmic board or something like that. But, and so that's valid because it helps people. It's another way of defining it. But the important thing is to own it. That's the important thing. We must know that there's no gap, there's no separation between who and what we are and that level of our own consciousness, that level of our intelligence. You own it. So the karmic board. So now I think what we could do is use that. We can do some examples with it. And I noticed a lot of questions have come in. So why don't we do some healings? And we'll work with karma, and we'll get in and work with the karmic board and see how it all applies. Okay, this is exciting. Let's dive. Okay, so there are some questions up here. Oh yeah, beautiful. You guys are awesome. So all kinds of beautiful questions. Let's go through one at a time. Here we go. Can I make a suggestion for healing? A healing for Dharma. Clarity and opening channels for Dharma to flow effortlessly into our lives would be super lovely. And I think this is an extension of that same question, which says, I was riding my bike just now and thought, Dharma comes with meeting the right people in life that support our Dharma, so surrounding ourselves by others that support it, beautiful. Could you maybe also include this into the healing? And I'm thinking meeting the right soulmate partner and nice people to work with, only if it fits the webinar, of course, just an idea. All right, so beautiful, beautiful question. All right, so Dharma. They say, we talked about that in the last webinar, not yesterday's, but the last week, I believe, that the bull of Dharma in Satyug has 4 sturdy legs. They are cleanliness and truth and mercy and austerity. So those are the four legs of Dharma: truth, austerity, cleanliness, and mercy. Those qualities all have resonant frequencies in the causal level of the physiology, right? Truth. Truth would be pure unmanifest being coming forward in a way which is so unsullied that the divine value of that expression is not lost in translation from unmanifest to manifest. So truth. And what we've already done, somehow it happened. We opened up that channel earlier in this healing session so that the junction between the unmanifest and the manifest is very, very clean, and it's very, very open. And the truth is coming through in a really beautiful, brilliant, like a brilliant white light way. But to apply the truth requires the truth to form the foundation for the belief system, because the belief system is the foundation upon which all of the feelings and thoughts and actions and so forth evolve. So what we want to do here to support Dharma is to open the relationship between truth and the belief system, which I see to be sitting at the astral level of the physiology. Because the causal level, that's where the intelligence which implements change. Okay, we've talked a lot about causal, but astral level is where we really start to get scaffolding that supports the manifestation of the material field. So the astral body, that's the level of self where we connect with the web of life. The astral body has a kind of a sort of holy shape, kind of a roundish sort of shape, but it's primarily comprised of threads of consciousness. And the threads of consciousness are not different from all the threads of consciousness that are in the rest of the field of creation. The threads of consciousness are inside you and outside you, and all of it is the astral body. All of it, the astral field. So we're looking at the junction, just that tender spot between the causal level of creation, where the laws of nature are responsible for the coming of truth, and then into the astral body. And I'm just looking at that junction, and what's happening is there's a beautiful energetic at the junction between unmanifest being and causal level that's been wide open since the beginning of today's session. I actually suspect there's a Jyotish connection there because it feels like it's in the air. But what we can do is we can use that open channel, that open field, the energy signature of the openness of that, and bring it up to the connection between the causal level of self and the astral level of self. And the first thing I'm feeling as that happens is a wave of fear. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. It's running through the ancestral archives. And I'm feeling that a lot of the ancestors are a little concerned about the breaking down or loss of some of their belief systems. So they have to understand it's okay, we can do it. The karmic board is very helpful at this point. Oh, I was wondering when the karmic board would factor in here. So what the karmic board is doing is that they're helping to arrange this process through time so that the ancestors can keep their beliefs for their lifetimes, because those beliefs were necessary at that time. They needed them. We're working it a little bit like vows or promises, which are almost always the appeal goes to the karmic board. If you have a vow or promise from a previous incarnation, even previous incarnations are also feeling a little bit of fear. I don't want to lose my beliefs. So, so the way that works is that at that time period, that belief was appropriate and it fit with the collective consciousness. And everybody felt comfortable because they're all sharing a certain belief patterns that allow their reality to have order in it, to maintain orderliness. But it's like a little, I'm thinking of the word time bomb, but not so much like that. Not so much like a bomb, I suppose, but a little bit the way the DNA determines how the body changes over time, something like that. That there's a orderly structure that's embedded into the belief system that supports its modification and transformation over time, so that even as the souls of the ancestors evolve through time, and they drop those bodies and they come back into new bodies or wherever they go, that their being also can evolve and morph with the change in the belief system as it traverses that process. Gentle is gentle. The karmic board did the gentle part. I mean, we could have just blasted in there, the truth, the pure truth, because we know the pure truth is good, but overwhelming the system at any point is not good. Now, when we're working with the ancestors, we're working with DNA. So any type of healing that's done for the ancestors like this actually creates a fundamental change in the structure of DNA. And in this case, because what's really happening is the washing away of limiting belief patterns, is that the DNA is washing off, it's sloughing off through the whole body, And I'm just taking a little scan on everyone's bodies, that this can go through the whole physiology, the morpho groups responsible. Those are those chemical compounds that are responsible for silencing parts of the DNA, right? They're created by little toddlers when the parents are undergoing stress. And I'm just reading through the group and I'm watching that. I'm watching it. I'm particularly watching times when the collective, when your ancestors were going through times of collective stress, like revolutions, wars, those times. It's very difficult. That if mommy and daddy are under stress, but so are all of mommy and daddy's friends, and so are my older brothers and sisters, and like everybody. It's a very difficult time. Those are the densest morpho groups in the body. So we're going right in, getting muddy, washing out those deepest. And looking at them, this may sound strange, but as I look at those forms, as they're sloughing off the DNA, they're also beautiful in their own way. Everything in creation has its own kind of special beauty. So as it goes, there's sort of like a blessing that goes with it, a sense of like wishing it well, and thanking it for the role that it played in the physiology during that time, and then letting it go. Letting it go with love. And what that's doing is it's supporting the ability of the ancestors to act as, to rise into a higher level of their own potential and to support each other better. Support each other better. There's a lot of guilt that's sloughing off with those morpho groups. For the parents especially, for the parents especially. Every parent knows if they're going through a stressful time and their little toddler shuts down in some area, they hold that their whole rest of their life. Now they can let those go. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And the energy that's radiating from the soul or the heart of the form of the causal body is the most lovely, radiant mix of gratitude and forgiveness and adoration and reverence. It's just beautiful. It's beautiful. It's radiating through the entire ancestral archive, and it's just softening up those spots where the morpho groups had grabbed onto the DNA, and it's just allowing them to slough off. And it's almost as if that feeling from the causal level of the physiology is promoting this healing to move to another level of intensity. Like kind of like a snowball effect, right? We sort of started it by getting into those intense moments in the history of humanity where there were wars and people were under stress collectively and individually. It was very rough, and it's letting it, it's taking the quality of the softness in the DNA. It's the resonance in the DNA itself that allows the DNA to like let go of that morpho group, just let it go. And it's using that as like a light medicine to communicate to the whole DNA, all through the whole strands of the family information, so that the whole instrument gets a chance to slough off any excess of these morpho groups. And what I'm seeing for people in the group physically, the way it's manifesting in our bodies, one of the ways it's manifesting, which is interestingly similar to a healing we did yesterday. I can do the whole session just on this one question. It's so fantastic. But there's like 7 more questions, so I have to go to everybody's question. So anyway, but yesterday, I'm just going to click that in with the healing from yesterday, which caused a shift in the structure of the bones and muscles and ligaments and tissues, particularly of the spine and the back. So this is literally seems to be another layer of that. So the most amazing and wonderful question. I mean, that was just one leg. That was just one leg of the bull of Dharma, okay? We could, and it took like 20 minutes or something. Sorry for all the other people who have questions. So with regards to, but I'll just address the second half of this question too. We could go on and do healings for the other 3 legs of the bull, but I think I'd like to address other questions for now, so we could say that for another webinar. But with regards to hanging out with people that are supportive of your evolution, the principle there is, it starts internally, that we activate the structures in our own causal field, which are related to those types of relationships. So, for example, the activation that we did, the download everyone got for working with their own karmic board. Though the karmic board is a really great group of people. You could think of it like that. I mean, not people with physical bodies, obviously, but that's a part of one's own self, which is functioning at a very high level. Basically, what we want to do is align the energy structure of self. So now we're going in and looking at a room, and that's the room of all your relationships, the room of all relationships. And what we're doing is we're resetting the wall so that it's more at the forward end of the axis of less aware to more aware. ideally, what we want to do is we want to surround ourselves with people that are more aware, who are awake inside. So I'm just feeling that. How to restructure. How do we restructure that wall? How do we move that wall? Just lovingly. All it takes, this is energy healing, attention. We look at where the wall is set right now, and if it's set in a way that it just keeps bringing people into our lives who are basically running away from their suffering, right? Using different excuses and justifications for running away from suffering, and bring us to, we want to move that wall up into the space of greater awareness of people who are reveling in going ahead and immersing themselves into the challenge and the excitement of dealing with problems in an effective and powerful and successful manner. And awake, and you learn so much. You get muddy, but you learn so much. So, and you can always take a shower. So I'm just feeling that move. And anyway, this circle, our healing circle, such awake people, such what broad spectrum of tremendous spiritual power and perceptual sensitivity and just wisdom, people of amazing wisdom, high levels of consciousness. It's amazing. Thank you all so much for being with me. It's like completely a privilege and honor to be with all of you. All right, next question. I'm wrestling with the question of whether or not we are meant or able to alleviate our own suffering from a karmic standpoint. Can we truly overcome a karmic debt through means other than suffering? I'm just starting to understand karma and dharma and all those things. I know it's like a very interesting, but also very abstract and also complex field. Also, I thought this could be one of those discordant beliefs, maybe. So, yeah, the principle of karma is that individual karma is tied into this. It's sitting, like we have our little suitcase of karma, and we're sitting in the station, and the station is the station of Kali Yuga. And so the laws of nature of Kali Yuga can cause the process of moving into the karma, can bring in sometimes malefic energies from the environment. So say something happens that's difficult. Such a perfect example was a couple of months ago, I was out in Northern California doing a workshop, and a lot of the people there had been through those horrible fires. And going through the fires was quite difficult, and there was obviously karma connected to and associated with that. There were people who'd lost their homes. But there were also all these malefic forces that were around at the same time. So I had people who didn't lose their homes. There was a sweet woman who didn't lose her home at all, but the fire came close and she thought she was going to lose the home. So helper people were there, and she was like giving all of her most valuable, most important things to the helper people who were going to go take them to the church for safekeeping or something, so that when the fire was over, she would at least wouldn't have lost all of her most valuable things. Well, wouldn't you know, the fire didn't hit her house, but when she went to the church, none of her stuff was there. And it turns out that, you know, the $3,000 painting that had been in the family since the 1700s was gone, and all of her passports and all of her, you know, important documents and all, it just gone, because she was dealing with her personal karma. But then there was also this overlay from the collective that was sitting there as well, kind of adding in additional challenges. So from a karmic standpoint, we select the karma, so that builds walls in areas of the causal realm. And yes, I would say the answer is yes. We are meant to, we have the right, we have the capacity to alleviate our own suffering without further suffering, without causing further suffering, by working directly at the causal level of the physiology and identifying the walls. And then it's like having a suitcase full of stuff. You come up, you're like, okay, I'm dealing with this situation. It's not good. So we go in and we look, awareness becomes settled, and we're looking at the very fine level, the seed or the source of that suffering, which you will be able to identify as a feeling. And if you're not sure, how do I identify the feeling? Put the hands over the chest area, because this energy field of the chest is the home of feeling your essential truth. That's where you find it here. So if you're not sure, you can use your hand chakras to help you. They help direct the energy, right? They help get it going where it needs to go. And it goes over the heart area, and you can find, well, how do I really feel about this anyway? I've got this suffering thing over here. So what's going on with it? Well, let's see. What's the feeling? Because the causal level of creation is also the finest level of feeling. It's the finest level of feeling. So you access that information through feeling, and you access feeling through the heart area. So you have all the tools. You are equipped. So it's a matter of going in and taking a good look and pulling out that suitcase out of the closet with all the other junk and all the other suitcases, and opening up the suitcase and bringing the contents of the suitcase out one at a time. And when we do that, we're able to bring it out in portions that are small enough that they can be dealt with or handled one at a time. And if every piece that you pull out of your suitcase is some kind of malevolent little nasty thing, then realize that at that point you want to be working with the axis, one of those 4 axes that I described yesterday, the axis of complementary pairs of opposites, right? So you pull out something and it's gross. So, right, so we've got that. Then the technology is I align myself with balance, right? I don't let myself get gripped to it, right? I don't want to be gripped to that little ugly thing. I want to just have it. I am in balance. I am allowing awareness to go to the field of my silence. And from silence, its counterpart is revealed. Then all I have to do is stay balanced. And what happens is the 2 complementary pairs of opposites get together and they create wholeness. They interact in such a way that whatever was unpleasant about that unpleasant thing is completed. And why does something even appear unpleasant in the first place? Because everything is being, right? Everything is divine being, and divine being is beautiful. So why would anything even appear unpleasant in the first place? Because it's kind of like an incomplete form that somehow divine being, unmanifest qualityless being, rose up, and then a little bit of karma got stuck right there, and it caused that piece to form a little bit like not fully formed. It didn't let the full light of being shine. And so when we bring the complement completes that form. And when it's completed, resolution is experienced, resolution. And resolution is also a resonance in the causal level of self, which we talked more about yesterday. So can we truly overcome a karmic debt through means other than suffering? Absolutely. But it requires these 2 things. It requires the willingness to get in and get muddy. And then it requires being able to not be gripped by what actually not getting muddy is what it requires. And if you stay balanced, you don't get muddy. So it requires going in and taking a chance of getting muddy and opening up the suitcase, but then maintaining balance and connection to wholeness, and then allowing the process of consciousness folding back on its own nature to resolve the situation. It's not too hard. It's like you kind of have to do it a few times, but after you do it a few times, it's like, oh, I see. So try it. And please, if you try it and you come up with questions, let me know. And we will go into it. We will unpack the suitcase more completely and see what else can come. Okay, here's another one. Someone very close to me is dealing with great fear that the change from what was to what will be is so scary, it's almost impossible to deal with. What that means is the transformation that that particular person is going through is fundamental. That means sometimes the old breaks down and the new builds up, and it's like these flowers. They come out in the springtime and then they wither up and die. And the next springtime they come out and it's kind of like, no big deal. Life goes on. But sometimes that which is dissolving is locked, and I'm seeing with this person, it's locked into a fundamental sense of self. So they don't just feel that something that was going on has to change and they're going into a new. They feel as if they are literally losing themselves. Like it's like dying. It's like a kind of a death or something. So what's happening in that particular suitcase is that there's some egoic structure tied in to that which is changing. So whether they're changing relationship, changing the location, changing jobs, whatever, there's a deep sense of self that's connected. And that's what's creating the intense fear, is I'm going to lose myself. Well, they're probably going to, this is why they're going through the change. They're going to lose parts of themselves. But rest assured, the part that will not be lost is the essential self. It is the deepest, most fundamental level of self, that which is closest to the truth, that which is the most perfect reflection of their divinity will not be lost. But right now, that divinity is covered by all these layers and veils of what they think they are, what they know themselves to be. So as those start to peel off, what is revealed first is fear. The fear gets revealed. And the individual has to make a choice at that point. There's another reason why the fear is there. Because there have been habits in the past of not dealing with this type of thing. So the habit leads one, when one has a habit of not dealing with messy things, then over time, one starts to feel as if they're losing the capacity to deal with messy things. And so then the idea of dealing with messy things is more daunting than it was if one is in the habit of going ahead and going in and dealing. So that's another thing that has to be released before they can get through the transition in a comfortable manner. They have to release the habit of not going in and dealing. Because if you get used to going in and dealing, it doesn't seem that hard, and you build up muscle so that the next time you can go in and deal with something bigger. So it's a process. So those two things, I think they need to realize that what the demon that they're fighting, the thing they're really fighting isn't the change on the surface, it's the ego. It's the sense of, oh, myself, which I'm losing. And then the other thing is to realize that if it seems like too big and too scary, start taking it off in chunks. You know, deal with as much as you can deal with it, and then go to the next chunk like that. And then they'll build up the capacity to get through the entire transition. Thanks. Awesome question. Okay, here's another one about karma. I have a question. What I feel in my life is that is not my karma. What I am living, it is a mix of my and my close family members and people, like we are all in collective karma. So what is our reality? Ooh, that's good. And I know this lady, and I would agree with her utterly. This is a woman who's a mother, so she's got her karma mixed with the children and the husband and the community. So thank you for the question. I'm looking. I'm just getting a read. Some of the connections to the collective karma are present in order to support growth of the heart. So we always all of us always have our individual karma, and we're also dealing with collective karma, like those folks in California who lost their stuff. So we always have some connections, both individual and collective. But what I'm seeing is that the choice in this lifetime to be a family member and to be dedicated community member are there in order to provide a foundation for greater heart strength. And we do this, I think I mentioned this a couple of webinars ago, but it's a beautiful point. And that is that over the course of many lifetimes and lifetimes great spiritual development, what we do is we get better and better at what we do. We become stronger, and our consciousness becomes more expanded and more powerful and more capable. And we start to take on, at each level, challenges which are a little bit greater than the previous ones. It's like that person who's trying to unpack that suitcase up there, you know, and they're afraid that if one is successfully dealing with one's own personal karma, okay, then one can branch out and start to support other people with their karma too. That can happen. People do that. People in a family do that. And also, this is very interesting, and I think it deserves a little bit of reflection back. But we're at 11. We still have a couple more questions. That is the walls of your house, and how sometimes, because we share also collective, causal body is also shared, that sometimes if there's a wall and it's too big and it's too tough and it's going to create some kind of horrible damage on one person, the family will spread it out among all members of the family and share it. It can happen. I've seen it in my own family many times. So the important thing, I would say, for the lady who asked this question, for my friend, is to be sensitive to how much you're taking on at any time. And if it feels like too much, know that you can pull back a little bit, and because it's kind of a shared thing, that other people can take a little more, you know, like at times, there can be a little bit of a flexibility or a give and take. And what we're really looking at here, everybody, this is so interesting. You've heard me talk about sacred gardens of the heart, which are sacred spaces in the causal field where we are in union with different people. So when you have somebody you love, there is a sacred space for your relationship with that person. And if you ever need to heal something with that relationship, or anything needs to be amended there, you can go into that place of your own causal field where you and that other person are unified, and gently, like a gardener, put some fertilizer in the soil and water, and it's your garden too, and you can rearrange things. If there's a wall running down the middle of the garden, you can deconstruct the wall and put up a temple to the mother of the universe there instead, or bring in a water feature, or that's the emotional value, right? The water feature is the emotion. Plant some flowers and invite the devas in. So what she's really talking about is, how do we deal with karma and structures of the causal field when they reside within the sacred garden of relationship with family? And I would say basically the laws of nature are the same, because at that level of self, we aren't really separate from our family members and our loved ones, really. That is a level of union there. So when you go in with the intention of highest good for everyone, and the intention that whatever act you perform in that space will be a sacred act that will support greater alignment with cosmic evolution, then you can't go wrong. And also now we've had this webinar. I think hopefully everyone has a better understanding of the mechanics of how that happens. I have 2 more questions, you guys. I'm going to try to get them both in. Here we go. Oh, 3 more questions. Okay. So the discoveries we've made regarding the axis is balance is everything, right? Yeah, that's the axis of complementary pairs of opposites. If nature is currently favoring suffering, does this highlight a lack of balance, and therefore we can do a healing to assist nature to move closer to a balance point? Oh, like all of nature. Like we're in Kali Yuga, and Kali Yuga has laws of nature that support suffering. Yeah, I totally agree. And I actually feel that that's what we're doing in these webinars. And I can, even now, my dear friend who asked this question, even now I would say, oh, I can't wait to include you in this. It's good stuff. As I mentioned earlier, I've been referencing, I can see a little bit the sort of trajectory of our webinars and kind of like where we're going with our webinars and the sort of really massive healings that a collective like this, a powerful collective of individuals who understand the mechanics of energy healing, can perform to promote well-being for the larger collective of mankind, for our earth, for humanity. It's huge. It's huge. There's certain things I can't say today because they're still kind of percolating, but I will be bringing those out in the future. And so I thank you for that amazing question. And the answer is absolutely yes. Of course, we as individuals can do that. And we're stabilizing our own balance and getting comfortable with working from that balance point so that other people don't feel so frightened and run away either. And I have a question, a technical question. My technical question is for my team here, which is that the last two questions have become truncated and I can't read them completely. And I think maybe it's because I wasn't deleting the previous questions. Let me just delete a few of the ones that I did before. Are you sure you want to dismiss this question? Yeah, sorry, because I already answered them. So I'm just deleting a few questions here. Sorry to delete, guys. Okay, let's see if those last two didn't get truncated. No, they're still truncated. So I've got two questions that got truncated. What can I say? So I'm going to have to say, I love you who asked the last two questions, but I won't be able to answer them today. I'm sorry. We're over our time. Hopefully in my spreadsheet, your question will not be truncated, and I can address that because I would like to do that. So thank you very much, everyone, for being with me today. It's been a wonderful time, and we did a lot of amazing work. It's beautiful to have you with me in Utah. It's beautiful to have everybody with me all over the world, and the precious, beloved Europeans. And I realized there was another question about suffering, which I think I answered, another question about Lyme disease, which I didn't answer. So I will make a video about that one, because I know that affects a lot of people. Thank you, everyone. Looking forward to seeing you soon at the next webinar with more. Hopefully by then I will be able to let out with some of the new stuff. Bye.